It's that time of year again. You can smell the distinct scent of pumpkin-flavored everything, hear the rustling of bags of mixed candy that are all owned by the same company. I swear they have to be. And of course, that faint pull in your gut to pull out your favorite horror movies and get the piss scared out of you by fictional creatures from beyond the realms of reality. That's right. It's Halloween. Time to pull out your Shinings and your Friday the 13ths and your Scary Godmother 2s, watching them by candlelight and relishing in the suffering of others to forget that your life is going to hell. Oh, don't I just love Halloween. But you might be like me and have been an absolute chicken for your entire life and don't watch a whole lot of spooky cinema at any point, let alone the spookiest season of the year. And so I don't have a ton of movies that I could talk about for this season. Except, of course, for one. Shaun of the Dead, directed by the wonderful Edgar Wright and released in 2004, is still regarded as one of the best horror comedies ever created. An obvious nod to Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead took the tropes and flaws of the zombie genre and made one of the cleverest comedies of all time that continues to make me and so many others laugh all these years later. And I don't think I'm breaking any new ground when I point out the rampant social commentary throughout the film, but I feel like it's one of those movies where people know it has social commentary, but conversations about it are usually like,
"Oh yeah, I love Shaun of the Dead and all its social commentary." What kind of social commentary? The social kind?
It's clear that Shaun of the Dead is saying something, but what exactly is it saying? What could this tale of a forlorn loser facing the zombie apocalypse have to say about our society? Well, it turns out it has a lot to say, and not just about society, but also about the human nature that created it. I think the best way to start looking at what Shaun of the Dead is trying to say is to look at the man, the myth, the legend himself, the titular character.
Go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over.
Shaun kinda sucks. He's a loser in his late 20s working a job he hates and living in a trashy flat, tolerating a best friend who only serves to drag him down and keep him where he's at. And the worst thing about Shaun is that ultimately, he's kind of okay with it. For as much as he says that he has things he wants to do, and as much as he wants to be respected and viewed as a hero, really, Shaun does very little to actually accomplish that.
Hang on, listen, Twilight. Uh-huh. I was gonna say, reload? I'm on it. Since... Oh, sorry, Shaun.
He can be a smart guy, he can be quick on his feet, he is the person that most often comes up with the plans and leads the group, but those traits are mired in emotional faults that he isn't quite ready to face. His relationship with his girlfriend Liz is a prime example of this. He does care about her to an extent, but he is mostly caught up with his own personal issues to be there for her as she deals with her own. He forgets to book a table for their anniversary dinner because he's far too preoccupied with getting respect from his younger co-workers and his stepdad. Respect he really doesn't deserve. After Liz breaks up with him for very understandable reasons, he still tries to save her from the zombie outbreak. This could be seen as a heroic thing, but really, he didn't need to save Liz. In fact, Liz probably would have been better staying where she was at because she was in an upper floor flat where it would have been harder for the zombies to get to them. He even proves that by being unable to get into the flat without climbing. His saving Liz is really just for him to try and prove himself as the hero he wants to be but isn't because he's far too willing to ignore or reject his problems than actually try to face them or solve them. Even the plans he comes up with all end with them getting somewhere and
Wait for all this to blow over.
rather than actually trying to figure out how to solve this problem. Which makes sense. I mean, what could Shaun do really? But I just think it's telling about this aspect of the character. He wants things to be easy, to just come to him, but getting what you want requires more than just sitting on a couch with your best friend and playing Time Splitters. That's right, Edgar Wright. I noticed that's what they were playing. You can't hide that from me. This is where we start getting into the social commentary of Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is a story about complacency, about staying put and ignoring the real problems at hand simply for the sake of making things easier, really. Shaun of the Dead is a story that takes a critical look at a society that engenders complacency and not facing the greater problems and faults that people are allowing themselves to be defined by. And if you don't believe me after looking at the character of Shaun and his desire for complacency, then let's look at a wonderful little thing called color symbolism. Aside from being the source of my least favorite meme of all time, color symbolism, when used effectively, can tell us so much about a narrative's themes and what it's trying to say. So, when a color gets mentioned or shown as often as the color red does in Shaun of the Dead, you better start paying attention. The color red coincides also with the symbolism of the zombies, who are very obviously covered in red. The interesting thing, though, is that red and zombies aren't symbolic of just one thing. Not only are they symbolic of two different ideas, those ideas actually contradict each other. On one end, the color red is a perfect symbol for the idea of complacency and not facing one's problems. The famous line, "You've got red on you," is said for the first time after a younger coworker calls Shaun out for not making something of himself. On top of that, the zombies who are covered in red are also perfect symbols of complacency with their one-track minds, slow meandering movements, and lack of the inner motivation necessary to follow one's dreams and reflect on their place in society as a whole. Yeah, I'm sorry, none of these zombies are going to end up making it to Broadway, but then, red and zombies also serve as symbols of action and motivation. As Shaun goes throughout the movie, getting braver and more self-sacrificial throughout, he continues to get more and more red on him. And the same line as the coworker said is said by his mother when he arrives to save her from what he thinks is a zombie stepfather.
Oh, got red on you.
And the zombies, despite being single-minded and slow, are certainly externally motivated by the prospect of human flesh and serve as the motivation for the other characters to become stronger and face their problems in a more direct fashion. This symbolism tells us a couple of things. For one thing, it helps us to recognize the themes of complacency and motivation in the rest of the story, but for another, the dual nature of it is also indicative of the dual nature of the human mindset. A character like Shaun can be complacent and unmotivated, but he doesn't have to be that. He can be, if he chooses to be, a much more active soul willing to face his problems and become the things he's always wanted to be. What the color red means isn't set in stone. What red is, whether that be complacency or motivation, is up to us. Up to Shaun. And throughout the movie, we see Shaun progress into this kind of hero, I guess? We see him start out as this loser who only seems to care about his own problems but refuses to actually do anything to fix them, to someone who will lead an entire crowd of zombies away in order to give everyone else a chance to escape. But that progression mirrors the progression of another aspect of Shaun of the Dead, its tone. The tonal progression of Shaun of the Dead is honestly one of the strangest I've ever seen, not just in a comedy, not just in a horror, but in storytelling in general. The movie is a comedy and predictably begins as a funny romp through the life of Shaun the Loser, but as the story continues, something kind of strange happens. Throughout the second act, there is interspersed within some scenes of legitimate drama into the wacky shenanigans. The death of Philip, Shaun's stepfather, is actually pretty sad and well done, and is followed by this joke right here.
I know it looks like him, but there is nothing of the man you loved in that car now. Nothing! Let's go, shall we?
Neither one detracts from the other, but the juxtaposition is uncanny, and if I'm going to talk about the tonal progression of this film, I need to talk in detail about this movie's ending. So, if you have not watched Shaun of the Dead, do yourself a favor and go do so. Please, the world will be better for it if even just one more person sees this movie. Go ahead. I'll wait. Alright, you're back. Wasn't that a great movie? Aren't you happy I had you watch it? Ha ha ha, oh, the laughs you've had. Anyway, about that ending, we've arrived at the Winchester Bar, the place where they're supposed to wait things out. It has been, throughout the film, a symbol of safety and ease, a place where things are easy and you can just drink your problems away without judgment. It should be where the movie ends, where they all wait for things to blow over as per Shaun's plan. But it isn't. It turns out that Shaun's plan was flawed. He not only led the zombies back to the Winchester after having sacrificed himself, as I mentioned earlier, but the Winchester's close quarters and ground level status make it a very bad place to be attacked by a horde of ravenous zombies, and what do you know? They get attacked by a horde of ravenous zombies. Wonderful. And what ensues is one of the most darkly funny and insane climaxes I've ever seen, with spectacular humor like hitting a zombie to the beat of Queen's Don't Stop Me Now. But as the climax progresses, we continue to get darker and darker moments and ideas, starting of course with Shaun having to kill his own mother who's been bitten by a zombie. Then 30-year-old Harry Potter gets torn apart in a gruesome use of practical effects. This girl most likely dies, Ed gets bitten, Shaun shoots his other roommate / zombie in the face, and they set the Winchester, that last vestige of safety and control, ablaze. So much happens in the span of so little time. People die and get hurt and break down as we follow our three main characters into the bar's cellar, where they realize there is nothing they can do to escape. Ed is bleeding all over the place and will most definitely become a zombie, and Shaun and Liz have no exit strategy, cornered by zombies that will do everything in their power to get to them. And so, with the last 2 bullets they have, they decide they're going to kill themselves before the zombies can get there and rip them to shreds first. This movie started out as a comedy about a loser and his farting pal.
Oh! Oh my God, that's rotten! I'll stop doing them when you stop laughing.
And now we're at suicide.
How many shells have we got left?
2. Suppose we could, take a few of them out if they stand in a line.
I wasn't thinking about them.
I know.
But the strangest thing about all of this is that, at least to me, there is this wonderful sense of honesty to it all. Shaun is forced to truly face his own flaws, recognize that in the end, this is all his fault. That if he hadn't wanted to be the hero, if he hadn't wanted to be something more than he was, perhaps none of this would be playing out the way it is. And the way that leads to such a logical realization and discussion of suicide is not only darkly humorous, but also deeply tragic. But Shaun finds that there is actually a way out. He tries to get Ed, his best friend, to go with him, but Ed makes the decision not to, coming to recognize that he will die and can't do anything about it. So he might as well stay behind and not hold them back the same way he believes he's always held Shaun back before.
Stop doing them when you stop laughing. I'm not laughing.
And then Shaun and Liz rise up from the cellar, prepared to fight off the zombie horde in one last bid for survival. Then a totally forgettable side character shows up at the military. The day is saved, zombies are taking away everyone's jobs, and Shaun is playing Time Splitters with Zombie Ed in the backyard shed. The end. You. The first time I watched this movie, that heel turn of an ending gave me so much emotional whiplash I thought I'd broken my spine. I was so confused as to what any of that was supposed to mean. It felt unearned, it felt like a fairy came in and said,
You learned your lesson, congratulations, now everything's fine.
and then made everything disappear, which is about as good of an ending as it was all a dream. I laid in bed that night thinking about it, wondering what the hell was Edgar Wright thinking? What kind of an ending could that possibly be? It's almost like all of that honesty and truth that was finally recognized in what they believed to be the final moments of their life was just thrown away by a society that didn't care and was only interested in maintaining the desire and love for complacency and simplicity. Oh shit, that's exactly what it is. The movie ends in this deceptive manner, this faux happy ending, but just look at this shot from the beginning of the movie and this shot at the end of it. It's practically the same one, but with a completely different tone. Nothing has really changed except for Shaun's attitude about the situation, but really it's the same situation. He's not escaped the rut he was in, he's just become stuck in a different one and he doesn't even realize it. All that tragedy and honesty that came forth at the Winchester is just scraped away, lost in a society that took that and made it a reality TV subject. To me, this ending is tragic. It's taking everything that was learned, every development that was made, and just throwing it all away, because in the end, that's what we want, isn't it? We don't want a sad ending. We don't want an ending that challenges us and forces us to examine the tragedy of our own human faults. We want everything to go back to being simple as though it ever was in the first place. We don't want to be challenged. We think we do, but all we want really is to just sit on the couch, play Time Splitters, and forget about the fact that our girlfriends want their life to be something more than just surviving.
If I don't do something, I'm gonna end up in that pub every night for the rest of my life like those other sad old fuckers, drinking myself to death, wondering what the hell happened.
Shaun of the Dead is not a critique of a society built on complacency, but of the human condition that made that society possible in the first place. Shaun of the Dead is about how us wanting an easy life is not only impossible, but irresponsible. We shouldn't be so quick to forget that our best friend sacrificed his own life to save ours, just so that we can go back to the shed and play video games with him still. I don't think that the horror of Shaun of the Dead is in the zombies, or the blood, or the gore, or even how much of a loser Shaun really is. The horror isn't what we're running away from. It's how eager we are to run away from it.